Hi, my name's Mothia. I've been asked by Lucy just to say a few words around my experience, both as a lawyer and also involved in a number of different kinds of protests over the years. Just as a bit of background, I did a degree in English and converted through a law conversion course to becoming a solicitor. Trained at a firm called Cameron McKenna, and then worked for a number of years at a firm called Bircham Dyson Bell, now called BDB Pitmans, in its what was then its public law, planning and parliamentary department. And I think it was around 2012 I had, you could say, a conversion or an epiphany of some kind. And I remember actually the moment itself. So I remember a friend of mine, he's now working with the government legal service and still working there. But we trained together at York College of Law, and we were very both passionate about public law and still are in our different ways that we're expressing it. And by that time, I'd gone to his home, and we were having a chat, and I was saying, some frustration at the way things were. I think it was quite a difficult year, 2011, 2012, and my friend had mentioned about the Occupy camp, whether I'd been at it, and I'd said, no, I wouldn't. It's not something I would go to, because I want to do something a bit more tangible in some way, in terms of what I saw, go beyond protesting. Really, I at that time I was seeing protest as, what's something that you might get involved in student politics, but I wanted to move beyond that. And I guess I had a limited idea of what it meant by student politics because of my own earlier experiences, not seeing it as a part of a wider movement, really ingrained in how we understand ourselves as being, what it means to be human. In fact, we've got to be careful about the language we use as well when we talk about the right to protest. It's this right to under the Human Rights Act, it's the right to assemble. And when I was taking part in the Occupy movement, and just going back to what my friend said, when I said it, it's just, I want to do something more goes beyond protesting. He said, had I been to the camp? And I said I hadn't. So he said, well, go and see what you think by going and talk from your own experience. And I thought that was good advice. So I did go. And I was so moved by what I saw and felt in terms of the tent city university, the way there were so many people were gathering from so many different levels. It wasn't just students, but the whole gamut of civil society had come together to have conversation, to debate ideas. And I think it was that debating of ideas that I hadn't even known and recognized as a possibility, because our spaces are so limited, whether we're educated in universities or whether even there we're sort of the type of education you can get nowadays is contained and constrained and packaged in certain ways. And here it was a free flowing of ideas. And in fact, I supported one of the litigants in person at the Court of Appeal. And the reason that I got involved actually was because when I went to visit the tent to the university, there was this loud sort of loudspeaker saying we're about to have a meeting to decide whether we're going to leave or not, because the council City of London have brought a claim against us, and if we don't leave in 2 weeks, they're going to carry take an injunction to court. So I felt that, well, this is a decision for the Occupy movement, and I was about to leave. I was sitting on the steps of St. Paul's, and somebody said, "Why are you leaving?" And I said, "Well, I'm not really a member of the Occupy movement. I'm just sitting here." And he said, "Well, you are, because you're a citizen. You can take part because you are, you're a citizen. So there's no membership as such. And actually, I don't know why that blew my mind, but it just, you don't have to apply to belong. You just belong because you're a citizen. And it's such a basic and yet such a invigorating idea suddenly that I was part of this group and we were having these conversations, and what I said mattered to the eventual decision that was made at that particular meeting to actually stay. And I felt this is what democracy is meant to be about. It's not meant to be just this packaged thing where you go and vote. It is meant to be your sense and your lived experience of belonging in society, this gathering with others. And so that's why I took part in the Occupy movement. So I stayed there for 2 weeks. And during that time I stayed there, I made some friends, and I met Dan Ashman, who was one of the litigants in person. And so I supported him, me and a number of other lawyers. One of them was Melanie Strickland, actually. And at that time, well, she's a lawyer as well. And she was one of the Stansted 15 that was taken to court and were convicted, but had their conviction overturned at the Court of Appeal because of the way in which the police were pushing down understates. The prosecution service was actually taking a far heavier an approach to peaceful civil disobedience. And that is what we're seeing throughout, you could say, the actions of the state leading up to the Police Crimes and Sentencing and Courts Bill at the current time. So I'm going back here 10 years, 2012, and this course of appeal case that I was at. And so we supported Dan Ashman put together this skeleton argument. I'm just going to read a paragraph from our skeleton argument, which I just found again, because what we were trying to say is that the courts had seen the camp as a protest camp. And we said, we respectfully submit that the essential purpose of the camp is as a space for citizens of this country to assemble to discuss public issues of fundamental concern to our shared humanity, shared not only by the group of citizens encamped on site, but also by the wider group of citizens of this country. For this reason, we submit it's more properly described as a public assembly camp. And as a public assembly camp for the purposes of transmission of ideas is what we were trying to bring across, that it's a camp for the sharing of ideas and transmission of ideas, which is expressed through the right to assemble and the right of freedom of expression. And I think that then brings in one of my other sort of pieces of work, when I was working for Extinction Rebellion, or supporting Extinction Rebellion, I was talking about it as a civil rights movement. And part of that was from reading this book, The Struggle for Civil Liberties by Conor Gearty. And it's really well worth reading that to get a real sense of the struggles of what we take as normative and normal were actually part and parcel of this pushing against the state or reactionary ideas to actually open up different kinds of space. And there is a transformative engagement. When I say political, I don't mean political in terms of political party, but this idea of, so what I want to bring in is just this, in one of the articles I wrote, I quoted Conor Gearty, and Conor Gearty, he differentiates between what we call as human rights and what he calls civil rights. And so what he said was that civil rights are partly political rights, but are rights which are only exercised in community, whereas the human rights is one which restricts the full capacity of being human. So it's not one of the so-called rights of man, all in private interest, private desire, right of man, there is kind of this conundrum myself, feeling that when we talk about human rights, that progressive, that is also
started with the idea of the self as the core foundation, something which I was sensing. I built my own sort of as important so it's then for me stepping beyond the circle of the self. This is what the right to assemble, the right to expression in particular give that's separate from the other human rights. It gives us the capacity to engage with others. It takes us beyond, it takes us to the place where we have the experience of what it means to be in community. Takes us beyond the isolation of the self, and where we can be reduced to the consumer and reduced to the individual and separated, because it's in that coming together that we find ourselves with a much more expansive sense of what it means to be human. And for me, that is the right approach, is the right to remain human at that level, and it's a right to challenge whatever the social forces are that are preventing us from being able to experience ourselves fully as human beings. And say the law is or the state, I shouldn't say the law, but the state has garnered for itself a place in the creation of laws that gives it the capacity to institutionalize certain kinds of inequalities. And that's what I was bringing to through in my work at Extinction Rebellion. I first came across Extinction Rebellion around 2000. So it was at the very early stage, hadn't yet finished its declaration, the declaration, and I when I saw the declaration, I emailed Gail Bradford, who wasn't known at the time, but she was with a small group of people, and I emailed her and said there was something in there that I really wanted to bring out, which I didn't think was coming out, which was the sentence, and it was to do with by our conscience, by our conscience we declare self-rebellion against the government, against this institutionalization of our separation. And I said, well, not everybody goes with conscience. There are many which go with their reason too. So we need to encapsulate the full capacities of what it means to be human, both with our reasons and our conscience, which was in the first article of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that we have these two fundamental capacities. We included some other words there to make more sense of that. That there is a differentiation between different aspects of being human: the rational thoughts, the moral concern or ethical conscience, and also our spiritual belief, that which takes us and can motivate us in different ways. And so that's how I got involved with XR. I was part of the political strategy team at the beginning of XR. With a lawyer, and there was 5 or 6 of us in that team. I gave a lot to that because it felt like here was something that was trying to bring 2 aspects of what it was to be human, which were sort of core to my own motivation. One was the principles and values, which really sort of centered this kind of ethical conscience, moral conscience, spiritual conscience, together with a tactical tools, which I think the Occupy movement has lacked in some ways, of how to go about doing, creating certain situations that could bring to the fore the questions of the climate and ecological emergency bring it, have core demands. This idea of creating dilemmas through dilemma situations. So, for example, to block the highway and therefore create a dilemma on the public authority whether to arrest everybody and therefore getting to the media's attention and therefore to the public conscience, or not to arrest everybody and then to have the economic damage from the blocking of the road. So it was that level of tactical thinking as well which really drew me into Extinction Rebellion, together with its that kind of conscience aspect as well, so bringing these two sides. And there is something around, I don't know how many of you have been involved in sort of these civil disobedience, you could say, and there is a continuum around that between, say, protesting lawfully or protesting on the streets, through marching, where the consent is given by the authorities, towards minor disruption, towards those where there becomes more of an economic disruption, where then the state pushes back much harder, but then that also brings it to the public attention more. So there's this continuous shifting that one gets involved in. There is an excitement. There is there's a kind of wildness about the public spaces. That's something also to maybe bring in this sense that we have these very tamed spaces when we talk about the streets. And also, where do we? One of the key things around the public assembly that I brought in around the Occupy movement is that we have so few spaces in which to have the free exchange of ideas, and that was, I mean, it was such a big epiphany for me to go to that Occupy and see what actually the free exchange of ideas was like, what potentially the town square was like in Athens, or but now we have all these public, well, what seems like public spaces, but actually private spaces, of public space protection orders, so there can be restrictions upon what can actually happen in what seems like a public space. So we have all these restrictions, but we don't even necessarily always see that and what we could fully be as human beings if we were allowed to sense that through this assembly. So for me, the right to protest is less just about, it's to find the firm ground around what it is that we are wanting to experience as human beings, gathering together with others, the joy that there is in seeing each other as to see each other grow fully, and to have that critical intelligence to see and be with others in engaged manners that is beyond just a kind of consumerist perspective. Which is to promote that sense of political engagement between self and the other, to have that connection rather than a kind of distancing where the other is always something alien, something to be feared in some way. And that's maybe where the law is coming in some ways with the police crime and sentencing bill. What happened after the XR actions that I took part in? Two of them, just quickly mention. I know I haven't got much time left. I don't know how much I've been speaking for. But, a bit too long. So I'll cut it short. So the two actions I took part in the streets were the Blood of Our Children action, and also blocking one of the bridges, the Faith Bridge. But both of those actions, when you take part, not knowing how the police are going to respond, there's something about not seeing the police as the opposite, but also part of this performance or performative space that has been created where the police are as an actor as well in the space, and a sense of the kind of what, yeah, the emergence and being ready to react, respond to the situation as it arises, has something freeing about it. But yeah, just go into this sense. So from that, the police then began labeling, well, not just the police, but the newspapers and certain papers that are the labeling of this as being extremist action, and connecting it then with, so for example, to prevent extremism. And so there's a guiding of ideas of public conscience towards seeing activism as extremism, and a blurring of the lines, which makes it quite dangerous, well, dangerous to democracy, dangerous to that free expression of ideas, because suddenly only what is not being challenged, what is acceptable, so what is unacceptable becomes unlawful, and it's in that unacceptability, it's in that pushing forward, as I mentioned, Conor Gears, which is where we begin, where we have much more, where we grow and progress. This sense of institutionalized inequality, whereby we are being where the law is beginning to dehumanize certain, by creating certain categories, whether it's being a migrant or being a welfare spender or an addict or not being even vaccinated, now creating these differences of rights between, or what is possible between one side and another, be creating these differentiations and lack of equality of experience between them, which creates more sort of this kind of dividing aspect that's keeping us unable to come together in some ways, to find the will, collective will, to be able to engage, to transform the current political economy, which is keeping us trapped in that system. So that's some of my experiences, and yeah, it would have been good. I'll send a few links over as well. And I hope I've covered some other things. I think maybe one takeaway to bring is around that the law of protest, even though you're studying it and it's therefore it seems like something out there, we're always entangled in the system, in the law, that we're not separate from it in our daily life. To have a sense of you being in and already entangled with that, and what it means to what critical engagement with the law, with critical thinking, education and institutions that get created through the law. How is that conditioning the way that space is experienced? And when this aspect of protest, what is it that people are protesting about? What is it that what are the needs, the fundamental needs that they are looking to maintain, or the experiences that they're looking to maintain, that's so important to them and to me and to you. So I hope that's helpful. Thanks very much.